say a prayer?
No, we'll be fine.
Mom's like, well, maybe.
We already prayed about it this morning, so.
So not exactly a funny one, but a more serious tone in this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Welcome back, guys. We're so glad that you're joining us and supporting us, and we're having so much fun with this and just trying to get our stories out there. Thank you for following Life at 2030. We will bring you as much as we can because there's going to be a lot of content. There already is, and we're so grateful for that. I'm so glad that Mom and Dad are on today again, and thank you for sharing your stories in advance. Today, we're going to talk about unexpected trials, and this is a little bit of a heavier one. I came across this little quote that says, "A ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are for." And I liken that to stories, that our stories that stay in our hearts, they're safer that way, but sometimes these stories, that's not what they're for, that they do need to be told. So we're going to tell some unexpected things that happen. We're going to start with, first I'll introduce again, we have John doing the tech. Thank you for that. We have Mom joining us as our special guest, and she'll be back for more. I hope you want to come back.
Oh, yeah.
And we have Dad here again, which, sorry, Dad, I think you're stuck doing this every time. Sorry, but not sorry. So we're going to talk about 3 different stories that have similar things that have happened, but different circumstances and what we've all learned from that. So go ahead with your mission story, Dad.
Okay, well, today we wanted to talk about unexpected things that happen. And as a young missionary, I served in the country of Ecuador. And I was serving in a little city called Cuenca. And I got a call from the mission president that I needed to come to Quito. So I went to Quito, and the mission president says that I have a blood type that an American family who are members of the church, their little 3-month-old baby needs some blood for a procedure she's having. And so I met them at the hospital, and they tested me, and we were a perfect match, me and the little girl. So I gave her some of my blood, and she was fine. And 3 months later, we came back to Quito for a zone conference, and this family asked me and my companion to stay with them. So sometime in the night, I heard the little girl crying, and I just assumed that the mother was going to get up and take care of her. Wasn't my place as a missionary to get up and take care of the child. A couple hours later, I heard the mother crying and went in there, and the baby had died a crib death in the night. And this was my first experience with someone who I really loved passing away. And because I was a missionary, I was really concerned about the family, but I also knew that families could be together forever. And so this really affected me when I got married, because when we brought my first son James home, I couldn't sleep at night because all I could hear was him breathing. And I was waiting for him to stop breathing so I could run in there and wake him up. And so I learned early that I had to rely on the Lord, that if the Lord wanted to take him, he was going to take him. And I didn't have much choice with it. But it did affect me in that it was a child who was taken early, way too early, and a family was affected, and I went to the funeral, and things were never the same with me and children, because I knew the fragility of a child, how, if the Lord wants him, he'll take him, and not much you can do about it.
That's true. Yeah, that must have been really hard for you to go through, and for Mom to hear. And Mom probably said, "It's okay, Paul. Jim's gonna be okay."
I drove her crazy. How did you feel, Ann?
Well, I'm the youngest in my family, so my sisters and brothers that have had families. Well, I did have three sisters that had either a crib death or a baby that died right after birth, and so, but I didn't know, I wasn't old enough to bring it all in, and but I just knew that our baby would be fine, and I couldn't understand why he felt the way that he did, but he got over it pretty quick.
And then Melba's sister had a baby that died, and we had to go to Afton, Wyoming in a blizzard. We barely made it for the burial, and there's another baby that.
Yeah, it was around.
He was 3 months old when he died of a crib death, and
His name was Clifton.
we were pregnant with Jim. He was 6 months. I was 6 months along with Jim when that happened, and that was pretty scary.
So I just figured all babies died.
Yeah, and I'm glad you saw that that doesn't happen every time. So fast forward, oh man, how many years till you were pregnant with Allison?
A lot. Allison's our last child, and I was 10 days overdue. And so the doctor said, okay, this day we want you to come in, see if you're dilated. If you are, we'll start you. And it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and someone was frantically knocking on our door. And I couldn't figure it out, and I had just woke the kids up to get ready for school. And there's a woman said, can I use your phone? And I said, what do you need the phone for? And she said, our baby died.
Yeah, she was shaking.
She
She
was
was
our next
white
door
as a
neighbor.
ghost.
Yeah.
We were freaked out as kids because we were all little too.
So we were watching out the window to see what would happen, and we saw the medical examiner come and take the body away in a little truck. And then the kids had to walk to school that day, and I remember looking out the window, and Pa would walk them a little bit. And they were walking away, and I just started crying. That is so very sad when a child has passed on.
So we were walking down the alley with Dad going to school, and you would go around the corner and catch the bus right there on Main
Right.
Street. And I remember we were all just kind of dragging our feet and so sad, just thinking, oh no, we hope everything goes okay with Mom and the new baby because we want a new baby.
Well, you guys didn't want to go to school.
We
You were
didn't.
afraid that Mom wasn't coming home and baby was going to die, and you were crying and upset. And
So I remember when we were ready to part, you stopped and you took the time to hug each one of us and to say it was going to be okay. And then we walked to school and somehow made it through the day, and we were so excited. And then that's the next day when we left Jeff at Grandma and Grandpa Carling's. We went through a lot right then, right?
Yes. So then Paul didn't want to miss any work, so I drove myself to the hospital.
that's a wife, man. Go have the kid.
I went to the hospital.
Well, we weren't sure if she was going to be induced or not.
So I was walking down the hall and went right past the nursery in the hospital. And so I cried again, and then when I met with the doctor and the nurse, I told them what had happened, that the baby had died next door to us, and I'm sure that gave them a lot of confidence. But anyway, I went in and they induced me, and we had Allison. She was great.
They got me
She
off
was
my
my baby.
bus, and I made it.
Yeah, I adopted her. I was her second mom.
Yes, you were.
I immediately said, sorry, Mom, she's mine.
That's right.
Because you're the only one who can understand her.
Oh, that's right. So Dad, on your mission, that was the first time that you realized that something could go wrong, that a baby could be taken. And that was the first time for us to realize with Allison and Mom that something could go wrong. And this is our...
Let me say one more thing. Prayer was always a big part of our life, and we had a mighty lot of prayers when it came to everything.
And it brings a lot of comfort to stop and to
Yes.
say a prayer. So there was one other time that that we all as a huge family realized that things don't always go the way we want them to go. So enter our sweet little Alyssa.
It was Friday afternoon, and I was ready to go home, and the phone rang, and it was our oldest son, James, and he said, Mom, you got to come to Rollins, Wyoming. the baby not moving in Monica anymore. And so and then he called back and he said, "Oh, never mind, you don't need to come." And, but I knew we needed to go. And Dad was in Bountiful seeing his parents. Allison was at the DI, and so none of us were really home. And so I went home and I was able to call my husband, and he picked up Allison, and we stuffed a bunch of stuff, didn't even think about what we knew or how long we might be. Got in the car and started heading up east on Parley's Canyon, and we got about halfway to Rollins, which was about, a 6-hour ride?
This is the second time James has called us about this thing.
Oh, I'll let you tell about that.
Okay.
We were about halfway there, and Jim called us and said that they'd had a neighbor come and watch the 3 older children. Well, they went to the hospital, and they had an ultrasound and found that the baby had indeed passed away. And he said, "Just turn around and go home." And we said, "Are you kidding? No, you need us more than ever." And so we continued out there. Monica didn't have the baby for another 2 or 3 days. But we mourned with her, and we mourned with the children. We were there, her parents were there, and one of her sisters, and we all mourned, but she still hadn't had the baby. Now, this was Friday.
Tell him
By Monday,
why she didn't let the doctor take the baby.
Monica goes to midwives. She'd already had a C-section, and if she had had to have another one, which was what they wanted to do, she couldn't bear her children naturally. That was just not her way. And we appreciate that she didn't. But it took about 3 days for her to finally have the baby, especially when she realized that we were going to have to go home. But when she had the baby, then we were able to stay a little bit longer.
Well, this is the second time that James has called us. Once with his son Grant, but they lived in Salt Lake, and the baby had stopped moving, so they called us and asked if we could come up and tend the kids while they went to the hospital. Well, they got to the hospital just in time because they took Grant because he was not breathing. They were lucky to keep him alive. And so with Alyssa, we thought the same thing. We'd go there, take care of the kids. She would have the baby and things would go well, but it didn't happen that way. And so when we got there, the baby was dead inside of Monica, but she didn't want to not be able to have midwives deliver the rest of the babies.
Experience with that, you see the baby for an hour or 2 at most, and then they take it away, and you don't get to bond really.
And so the midwife was grateful because midwives had not ever delivered a stillborn. And so this was the first chance that a midwife would be able to, at least that the midwife knew of, to be able to deliver a child. And so we were there with Jim, and Monica's parents came. We spent time there. And then Alyssa was born early Monday morning. And as we came upstairs, the midwife was working with Monica, and our son James was cleaning beautiful little Alyssa up. A little redheaded girl, probably 21, 22 inches, bright, beautiful dark red hair.
She was plump, right?
Yes, and he was cleaning her up, and we'd already made arrangements. Jim had made arrangements for a photographer to come and take some pictures. He cleaned her up, got her dressed. Melba had made a blanket that we had brought for her. It was a beautiful purple blanket with elephants.
Little tiny beautiful elephants.
Little elephants. And so they wrapped Alyssa in that. And for the next 12, 13 hours we spent with Alyssa. I held her in my arms. I pulled the little blanket away from her nose so she could breathe. But she never did. And the mortician came and told us that he would come and get her and that she would not. He said the mortuary, where we keep the bodies is downstairs, but she will stay with us. upstairs. She will be in a fridge there and never leave our sight. And then you can come tomorrow morning and put something in her casket and we'll seal the casket.
But all day long, we got to hold that little girl. And the spirit and the peace that was in the home was so excellent.
What did the midwife say, Mom?
Well, that was after we had a little family home evening, and we're all singing "Families Can Be Together Forever." And the midwife came out, and she didn't understand how we could be so happy and calm with the death of a child. And so we explained a little bit about what we knew about the plan of salvation, about that she wasn't gone forever, that at some point we would look her in the eye and be able to talk to her
And love her.
and so the midwife was really touched by the knowledge that we had, the peace that we had. But Jim and Monica were still upset, and the girls, it's hard for the siblings to be there with a child who's passed away, because Monica's mind was on the child that passed away. And I'm not saying she was neglecting the other children,
No way.
but she wanted them to be a part of it. And I don't know how much kids can be a part of it or want to be a part of it.
Because they were really little too. This was 6 years ago.
And so I asked Monica if I could take the two girls to McDonald's, get some nuggets and fries, and they like to use to dip the nuggets and fries in milkshakes. And Monica said sure. So Allison and I took the two girls to McDonald's and got them lots of nuggets and fries, and they played in the playhouse. And then the power went out. And we're watching a family of antelope just outside the McDonald's. Mother and father antelope and a couple of little babies walking around. And so the management let us stay there and let the girls play for almost an hour while they cleaned up the building. And one of the great stories was that, was it you that went across the street to the neighbor?
I went across the street to see if the power was out at their house, so that we didn't know that it was out at the McDonald's. And so I crossed the street and I said, "Is your power out?" They said yes. And I said, "I don't know if you know what's going on with Jim and Monica." And they said, "Oh yes, we heard it at our church that the baby had died." And so the word got around in Rawlins, Wyoming very quickly, in that little town.
Tell about the lady that brought dinner.
Oh, we had
Oh,
people.
the lady across the street was not a member of the LDS church. She went to another Christian church in the town. So word spread in that little town that the Carlings had lost their baby through all denominations. So little towns like that are pretty cool. And people from all over brought lunches, but this one lady was the best. I'll let Mom tell her.
Well, we even found humor at a time like this. This woman came in with it wasn't a crock pot, but that's what she had. She had a big casserole for us, and we thanked her up and down, and she told us, she said, "I had taco soup in the crock pot, and it spilled all over the floor in my car." And she said, "I looked at it, and I thought, maybe I can save it."
She said, "For a minute, I thought maybe I could save it."
Oh dear. That she didn't. She used Jim and Monica's carpet cleaner to clean her car anyway. But we laughed. That was the best thing. We could laugh about something.
That's true, because Jim and Monica were really frozen in place, just going, what just happened to us? And you guys were a ray of sunshine and huge support for them and her parents as well. And you guys realized, if we're going to have the funeral in a couple days, we have to go. And that was hard for you to decide, wasn't it? So tell us about that and continue.
Allison's pictures too.
Well, a lady took some pictures, and they were professional pictures of Alyssa. But in order to have pictures for the funeral, Allison had taken a bunch of beautiful pictures of Alyssa in her beautiful dress. And so Monica and Jim wanted to cater the funeral luncheon. And our daughters and daughter-in-laws just wanted to get involved back in Salt Lake. And we told Jim, there's people back there who need to do something, want to do something. And he said, well, we want it catered because this is going to be her birthdays, her graduations, her. And we said, finally, Monica's mother said no. The women back there will not stand for it.
In Enterprise.
In Enterprise. That's where we were going to bury Alyssa. So we were going to have a funeral on Thursday in Salt Lake and then a burial on Friday in Enterprise. So finally Jim relented and said, okay, we've agreed to let the relief societies at both places serve the meals. And so we called Julie, and
So I had been planning with Dion, my sister-in-law, and I said, Dion, I just have a feeling, what if we are going to be planning this luncheon? What are some ideas that you have? So we had already been communicating, and I was so excited when Dad said, okay, let's do it. And we had so little time, like I said before. So I texted Dion and I said, Dion, it's on. And she texted back and she said, it's on like Donkey Kong. And I don't know if that was my brother Cliff that responded or if it was really Dion, but I don't know. It was really funny. And we reached out to the Relief Society presidency in Jefferson Ward where they were going to have the luncheon, and everybody was so happy to contribute whatever they could and to make this a very special time for our family. And we're really grateful for them. For everybody that contributed. So you guys were racing home.
So we're racing home so we can print pictures to get them to Monica's sister so that the programs could have pictures of Alyssa, so there could be some around the chapel. And so we're racing home while they're deciding, getting a hold of my Relief Society. At the time I was bishop. It was my final week as bishop. Whoops.
Okay.
And we're driving home, and we get into town, and we run right to Costco, and we buy a bunch of pork roast, potatoes, salads, whatever we needed for the luncheon. And Jonathan deep fried the pork roast. I vividly remember that pork roast.
We all gave our best.
And we had a wonderful family named the Davidsons. They were a Polynesian family, and they came and set up. They took down, we had a KitchenAid mixer over there that I had bought on KSL Classifieds. Great mixer. We were mixing the potatoes with it. After the funeral, Sister Davidson said, I wished I had one of them, so we gave it to her.
Oh, she was so thrilled. I remember that.
But we raced home. Julie sent the pictures to Monica's sister through Facebook or something. I don't know.
And the next day, so Wednesday, John and I had made taco soup since you guys were so sad that the taco soup had spilled. But in Rawlins, it was cold. Very cold weather. In Utah, it was like 90 degrees still, at least. And we still ate taco soup. But Jim and Monica pulled in.
Oh, go ahead. You were there.
Jim and Monica pulled in. All of our family was gathered at my home and John's home. And we just hugged each other. That's all we could do was just hug each other. And I remember Jim opened up the door on the side of his car where this little casket was, and every time I even would walk near that car, I would feel the spirit so strong, and I just kept saying, she's here. And Jim said, that's a gift that we've been given through this experience, is that we have felt her so strong that you just can't deny that she's there, trying to give as much love and to say, hey guys, I'm still here. So I truly believe this. Mom and Dad, you were sealed in the temple, and to all of your kids that were born in your marriage. And as you brought on each daughter and son-in-law, you, in my mind, like you're still forever for them too. And that's why it's so special and important to me, is because I feel like Alyssa is forever all of ours. And so it wasn't just Jim and Monica losing her, it was all of us, and we love her so much. So Wednesday we had dinner, and the next day was the funeral.
The next day we had the
that.
funeral, and the chapel was pretty much full. And our intention was to invite everybody to the luncheon. We had plenty of food, and so we had the funeral. But while we were preparing, we put Alyssa in my bishop's office and covered her with a beautiful little white cloth. And all the women went there to put their purses in my office. And one of the young ladies didn't come back for quite a while. So I went to my office to see if she was okay. And she was sitting there in my office, and she said, "I'm not exactly sure why this office feels so wonderful, but I don't even want to leave." And I said, "Well, why don't you come with me and I'll show you?" So I went around my desk and lifted the little cloth off the casket. And she said, "That's why." She said, "I didn't even know she was in here." And so we had the funeral. My mom and dad gave the prayers, and my dad broke down. He said, "Little tiny caskets like this shouldn't be in a chapel.
Yeah.
There should never have to be little caskets."
It's true. I think that Alyssa brought us all so close together. And Jeff and Elisa had just had a baby, and they were dealing with a lot of grief for this as well. They were saying, how did our baby survive and hers didn't? Like they I'm sure to this day still
Well,
deal
everybody
with that
had
a little.
little kids. Cliff and Dion
Yep.
had little kids, and this was reality brought to everybody.
Absolutely.
You know, my child could be gone in a heartbeat too.
Yeah, and during Jim and Monica's extreme grief, they were still comforting people and saying it's going to be okay. And that was so sweet of them, which must have been really tiring too. So the next day, we go and we drive to Enterprise, and you and I were stuck in a van together.
Yeah,
with my kids. John had to work.
John had to work, so Mom and I and Allison, who went?
All of us that could.
We all went in two vans, and we went to the funeral. And I mean, it was a beautiful funeral. Melba spoke, and Monica's mom spoke, and Jim and Monica spoke, and they let balloons go, and beautiful little cemetery in Enterprise. And I think the hardest thing for me ever was to watch two of my sons put a little girl in the ground.
That was hard. And it was hard when Jim was dedicating the grave, because he broke down so hard that I think it finally hit him fully what was happening.
And Cliff, I don't know if he'll ever get over it.
No, because he had his own little kids, and he's like, that could be my kids too. You just never know.
It was so weird because it's a farming community about 60 miles west of Cedar City in Enterprise. And about 2 miles away, there was a tractor pulling a load of hay. So I watched this tractor with a load of hay just going along a little at a time. And I thought, well, the world does go on, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
And these sisters in Enterprise who made this meal,
That was the best.
these sisters live for death. I mean, they live for death. It's their calling in life.
And that's why Monica's mom said, there's no sorry, I know you guys want to do this elaborate meal, this beautiful meal for Alyssa, but I don't know how to tell these women in Enterprise no. Because they said no, they won't take no for an answer. And so, yeah, I'm glad. That was so fun. We had such a fun time.
And the funniest thing was my son Jim. the calling he always wanted in the church was funeral luncheon director, so he could take the funeral potatoes leftovers home.
And the cake.
The fudge marble cake. So, Dad, this was a really interesting weekend for you because you had been bishop for almost 10 years.
Yep.
And in a sister ward.
In an inner city ward, too.
In an amazing ward that has a lot of stories that we haven't even begun to tell. But here you are, ready to end this chapter in your life.
Yep.
And you had this extreme support from this ward, and you were going to go back to your home ward and not really be able to see these people as much anymore.
I was leaving the ward I was bishop of, going back to my home ward in 3 days.
So your emotions were just right there.
So
anyway.
yeah, it was tough. That was basically the last official act I did because my counselor was conducting the following Sunday.
And what a beautiful moment that you got to be part of.
So that was a tough week.
Yeah. And so I want to know, what did Alyssa teach you? It's a lot.
It's all about love.
Well,
We loved her.
I guess she
And
taught
so
us
we
that
get-
she's
and-
always there.
We gathered together because of her, because of love. And it brought our family close together.
I mean, it makes me love the grandkids that are here. I don't neglect them. It makes me love them more.
Yeah, and we still
To know that any moment we could lose one. There's no guarantee that they're all going to be here tomorrow.
Yeah, and you have Alyssa's picture hanging up all amongst your grandkids. We send cards on her birthday. She's still very much alive in my eyes in our family.
Yep.
And we have a lot to still learn from her. And from Jim and Monica's example, I'm so grateful for their example. And you guys, how
I mean,
you
if
dropped everything.
anyone has had their share of tough times, Jim and Monica have.
Yep.
And there's no reason on earth why they should have had so many trials, but they have.
They have, and they have walked through them so beautifully. And their secret is because they bring the Lord with them too. And Monica's the one that is currently pregnant that we were saying maybe it's twins. You never know. But
they have the most amazing kids.
They do. I love all of their kids. So, Mom, is there any last words that you have?
Just love one another and forgive each other. And continue on. We all have to hang on to the iron rod. And love one another and try to follow the example of our Savior.
Yeah, and to remember we need each other.
Oh, yeah.
We need each other.
Don't give up. Never give up. Never.
Thank you guys for being willing to tell this really hard story. It's definitely from your heart, and it'll always be teaching us. And we're glad that you guys as listeners could hear this and be part of this, and hopefully you can get something good from it. So thanks for coming today, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Love you. Yeah,
Bye.
love you.